David, you and I have been friends for many, many years, and we've had conversations about all kind of things. And today, I want us to talk about your early development in Sea Scouts, because that has fascinated me from the very beginning when we have talked about it a number of times. Not only from the standpoint that the adventures that it offered you as a young man, but the fact that there's almost no information about it, so you're the sole source.
Well, we could hold off for just a second. I've got some couple little things we can look at.
Well, we're going to take pictures of those at the end, and so the people that are watching this, you can't leave until we get, because David's going to share the charter and some pictures and everything else as we go through. I think that's probably going to be easier, and I guess that actually Gus could splice them in there if we needed to as we go through there.
Well, it'd be good to have them with me where I could use for
get them. So, David, you know, when we first started talking about this, and I became interested, I contacted Central Florida Boy Scouts. They have no record of there being a Sea Scout ship in Eustis. They did give me the caveat that they had a fire a number of years ago that burned a bunch of records. So for all the people to Central Florida Boy Scouts, let Gus get a picture of what you have there.
Well, this was Boy Scouts of America charter granted to the Golden Triangle Lodge of the Loyal Order of the Moose, and they took care of us, and that was probably in around 1958 or 59.
Okay, so this is the...
but that is the second charter that we ended up with.
Okay, so first of all, I know that you weren't born in Eustis, but you came from where, Kansas?
Nope, I'm a Hoosier up in northeast Indiana.
Okay.
Yes, and came down here, left there during World War II to Nebraska, and out there for 3 years, and then we came back down here, and my dad couldn't get any parts to start his business back in Indiana, and Indiana people said, well, come to Florida for the winter, and by next spring things will be better. But we got down here, I guess we got support, we couldn't leave, but the weather was good, our health was better, and so we stayed, and I started at 8 years old.
You were 8 years old when you moved to Eustis.
Yes.
So, and we've talked about all the wonderful stories, and you know, David, we talked to Sam Sadler and Tom Horbert this morning, and they were classmates in Mount Dora High School together and grew up in Mount Dora. And there's this common thread, you know, of growing up in a smaller town and having friends and doing all kind of exciting things. And you're kind of like me from the standpoint that your dad wasn't a citrus grower, so you didn't spend all your time hoeing orange trees like these guys did.
No, I didn't. I was more like maybe mowing the lawn now and then and riding my bicycle a lot around Eustis.
But you were lucky because you were able to be a part of the Sea Scout program.
Yes, that got started, best by night, probably in the mid-1940s and late 1940s. And Sea Scouts at that time had a small sailboat that might hold 3 or 4, and that was their sailing, and it was called the Blackballer. We were ship number 5.
Now, Sea Scouts is actually part of the Boy Scout organization.
That's right.
And so rather than being called a troop, you were called
a ship.
A ship.
Yes.
And rather than having a scout master, what was your leader called?
He was called Skipper.
Skipper. But it was the same basic principles of where young men, boys, get together. They have an adult mentor that leads them, and they become interested in various things. And rather than camping out in the woods, you
camped out on Lake Eustis.
So we'll start. Let's tell me about the skipper. That's it's got to start there. The man who was the mentor.
John Pearson is the one that I believe that started the whole thing there in Eustis, and he apparently was a cabin boy when back at the turn of the century on a ship, and I don't know what all he was in, but John, somewhere in the late 1940s after World War II, somehow got started into Boy Scouting, and being around the oceans and sea, naturally, he had to start Sea Scouts. And but one little sailing boat doesn't hold 8 or 9 kids. He went down to probably Miami or Fort Lauderdale and found a used lifeboat. Back during that times, after so many years, you had to get rid of your lifeboat and get a brand new one. So this was a used, out-of-date lifeboat, and they trucked it up to Eustis, unloaded it, and started modifying it into a sailing craft. A cypress tree for proper size was found and trimmed and put in for mast, and a good heavy keel with a little centerboard that you could pull up and down, as most good sailing boats can do. And so it got started. The original sails were made out of parachutes. And Skipper Pearson cut and sewed the original sails that we had. And it was a different type of setup. It was called a sliding gunner rig. You had about an 8 or 9 foot mast and a second 6 foot mast that would slide up that. And so you could, which extended you another 6 or 7 feet. A lot more sail area.
Well, it seems like that Skipper Pearson was a very innovative and knowledgeable guy. He knew boats, and did he do a lot of the work, or did he was able to get local folks to do it?
Have no idea. When I showed up, it was all there.
The boat was already there.
The boat was there. They had already done the work on it, had the keel, and so we learned several different things besides sailing. When I first joined, and the meetings were at night, one of the meetings said, we're going to meet down at the T-dock, and that's where the boat had been kept. And so we're going to have a white ash breeze. We're going to sail out on the... So we got down there just about dusk, and we got into the boat. There was no sails. No, there was a bunch of oars in there. And I thought we was going to have a white ash breeze. And Skipper says, yeah, that's right, boys. It says these oars are made out of white ash. And so that's how we're going to move the boat tonight. And so we did. We learned how to row that big 25-foot lifeboat.
So about how many were there, David, in the ship?
We could probably, I figured we could put it, I think there was 6 on each side, would be 12, plus somebody on the tiller. And Skipper Pearson sitting up in the bow. I always wonder, why did he sit up in the bow? Well, when you get out and you start rowing a bunch, everybody's kind of discoordinated. Before long, you're getting together, and then you get the boat going faster and a little faster, and you dig in a little deeper, and you take one, and all of a sudden, everybody else put theirs down and brought the oars back, and you didn't get yours out of the water. But the boat was moving, and the oar was in there, and that oar would come back and hit you in the chest, and you ended up down on the floorboards. And Skipper would sit up there and laugh. He thought that was pretty cool. But he was a good teacher.
Well, you've related to me many stories about sailing, and sometimes y'all would take the boat out and spend all night on it, sailing around Eustis, Lake Eustis.
Absolutely. One of the best cruises that we went on, we had the sails up, just an extremely light breeze. You could only get a couple mile an hour, probably, speed, but And as things got later, a lot of the guys turned in, but I was back on the tiller and got it headed off and going so slow, and the moon was out and slight breeze, and I think I sailed about half of Lake Eustis that night.
Fabulous. No motor going, just
No motor.
just you and
Me and the moon and out on the water.
and the other guys kind of conked out there.
Yes.
Well, I imagine that there were other skills and other things that he taught you too. I mean, he had to have been most interested in stars and constellations and astronomy type things.
Quite interested in weather. I got enthused with cloud systems and wind, and because you need good wind to sail a boat with no motor.
Yeah.
And which was added later, by the way. But to begin with, it was sailing power and oars.
So it was either the wind or you. So
That was it.
Yep. Okay, tell me about the trip to Silver Springs.
Well, that was at a later time. Joe Folsom, first mate, assistant scoutmaster, if you like, ended up building a transit on the back of that so you could put a little motor on it. And quite often you get a little 2 horsepower Johnson outboard. One of the kinds that you put a rope around on the top and you pulled it, but if you really had a good motor that was tuned up good, you could set it to on, set the switch on, and get on the side of that flywheel on top and go like that, and it would go, and it would start up. And it didn't move it very fast, but once you got the boat moving, it was heavy. It would take quite a while. You would get up to a little bit of speed, but we went, and I guess that was after a much later date, after I was out of Sea Scouts and was the first mate. We got I think it was a 15-horse Johnson, and put on the back, and we started that all the way to Silver Springs, Ocklawaha River, and through the locks, and Silver Run. And while we were going through Ocklawaha on one of the canal, the water was kind of low in there. It was only about 2 feet of water. It took 2.5 feet because the boat didn't really go that much, but with the keel, which was about that deep, we plowed a little trench through part of that canal, which was useful. The water was clear. And on the way back, you could see where we had plowed the trench and had got into the deepest part of the canal, and you just followed the little trench along for a ways.
Kind of like you left breadcrumbs going up and followed them back.
And followed them back. That's exactly right. We spent the night on the springs where they had the glass bottom boats tied up there on the little dock. And so we spent the night on right almost on the boil where Tarzan and the movie people had been previously.
Now this was still an attraction then. I mean, this was well, it is now too. But
that was when it was a full attraction.
Yeah.
And we made our way back during the day.
They were nice, if I remember. The owners would let scouts and organizations like that come in on the river. I know when I was in Scouts, we went up there, but by then they had gotten a little bit more picky about it, and they couldn't keep you off the river because that was state waters.
That's right.
But they wouldn't let us camp at the spring. I mean, it was a
Right.
tourist attraction. People were there, but
We spent the night on the water up there.
yeah. So this was to me a really fantastic deal of where young men developed skills. They had fun. They were appreciative of the environment and so forth. And nowadays, at the Eustis Yacht Club, or the whatever they call themselves,
The sailing club there
sailing
now.
club. Now they're into competition and
Yes.
and
They come down from all over the United States
and
at
have
times.
some. But I think it's fascinating that did your boat have did the lifeboat have a name?
Well, the first one was the Black Baller, and the big lifeboat was Black Baller 2.
So Black Baller 2 was sailing on Lake Eustis way before the sailing club.
Long time before that.
Most of those people in the sailing club probably weren't even born when Black Baller 2 was high on the waves of Lake Eustis.
I believe I got into the Sea Scouts in 1950, and there were many of the times we had 12, 15 at a time in there. One of the biggest things that Skipper Pearson taught us was a lot about ropes and knots and how to properly coil a rope, and especially whenever you dropped out an anchor and how to set an anchor. But I learned all the knots and even how to make a monkey's fist. And because that was, you would do the rope around in a certain way and put a lead ball in the middle of it and pull it all tight and splice everything together, and you had this heavy monkey's fist with a rope on the end of it, and you use that to try to get, when you were coming on shore or wherever, you could take that monkey's fist, and it was heavy, tied to a little light rope, heave that into the, and somebody would grab it and help pull the rope in and pull the boat in and get you tied up. But we knew just about all the knots. Of course, we didn't have a Boy Scout manual. We had a Sea Explorer manual. Later on, they changed to Explorer program, which were for the older boys, 14 to 18. And so from the Sea Scout manual, we went to a Sea Explorer manual. But about the only difference between the two of them was a different cover. Still had all the information in it. Some of the sailing, one of the stories that's in the Sea Explorer and Sea Scout manual was some boys were seen out on a desert area, and they had a small sailboat on a trailer, and they seemed to be unloading it for some reason, and this man stopped and backed up and say, "You have a problem, boys?" Says, "No, sir, we're going sailing." Out in the desert, in this all kinds of weeds, but road going through, and it says, "Oh, come on now, how can you do that?" He says, "Sir, look over on the horizon. You can see a lot of clouds over there." It says, "There's a lot of rain happening over there. And before long, this whole area is going to be a small lake. And if we're lucky, we might be able to sail on this lake right where we are now for maybe an hour or two." So they were dedicated, even in the middle. I don't know where it was, whether it was Texas, New Mexico, or where, but you had Sea Scouts everywhere.
There was someone there who had developed a love of the sea and sailing and
Absolutely.
was going to take advantage of it every opportunity he got.
That's right.
Well, was it like Boy Scouts that you earned merit badges from doing things?
You were able to do some special things with Sea Explorers, but you could go through all of the usual Scout merit badges, and some of the boys did a lot of that. I went through several. Made my own sea bag, sewed it up using a sailor's palm and big needle and waxed thread, actually string.
Wow.
We did a lot of things.
So I wonder how many ships there were in Florida. I bet you there couldn't have been very many inland ships like Lake Eustis. You know, I would think that, yeah, you'd have one in Fort Lauderdale and Vero Beach and so forth. So it must have been very unusual to have one.
Yeah, Tampa, I know, had a couple of ships down there. I'm sure Miami area, and more than likely down at Key West. All along the coast, there would be sea scouting. But we were very fortunate because we had Lake Eustis, Dead River over into Lake Harris, Haynes Creek back up to Lake Griffin on the way to Silver Springs, or even, which I never got to do, I would like to have motored and then sailed on the St. Johns River, because we could have gone all the way to Jacksonville, the way they used to carry fruit on the ships, and that's where we're at the old Teal dock. That's where they used to load fruit onto the ships or boats.
Up there around Astor, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would have people now take that trip by motorboat, and you can put in at Sanford on the St. Johns, and the Ocklawaha though runs into the St. Johns.
That's right.
I remember as we went where Silver River ran into the Ocklawaha, it was really interesting because Silver River was clear and Ocklawaha wasn't.
It was very dark.
You can see the very definite line of demarcation between the Silver River and the Ocklawaha. But then the Ocklawaha eventually gets into the St. Johns, and
That's
then
right.
you can head up to Palatka and Jacksonville and all places beyond.
Out from there.
Well, how long was Skipper Pearson? Was he the skipper as long as you were in Scouts, or you said you weren't old enough to be the skipper, but you could be the first mate?
That was right. On the skipper, when they had to recharter for some reason, lost the old one or whatever, that W.C. Arndt ended up being the skipper and helped apply for the new charter. But Skipper Pearson at that point in time was 85 years old.
Oh.
He was signed on as a first mate, as I was at that time. And
Did he have a family at all?
yes, he was married. This was in 1959. So, but my time was in the early 50s, and that's when Skipper Pearson was the head man and got everything really.
So he wasn't a young man when you started with him. Then he was.
No, he wasn't. But
He must have had boundless energy, though, to be able to do that. And
he loved being around us kids and loved the water, loved teaching us how to use the water properly.
Now, where was the boat docked? Was it where the ramp is on Lakeshore Drive there?
Oh, the OT dock, that was right by Cottrell Marine. Just a little bit west of that, and extended out quite a ways into the lake originally. And there were boat houses at that point in time, and they were not all used. They were rented, and so they allowed us to tie up our 25-foot boat in an empty one, and every now and then we'd have to move around from one place to the other. But quite often it was just tied up out on the end of the T-dock with ropes, and along now and then would come a hurricane or a tropical storm and fill that boat up full of water, which means, of course, it was neat. It was great for kids because the boat would not sink. You could fill it full of water, rain would come along, and it would end up raining heavily, and it would get down until water was lapping over the gunnels over the sides, but it was still floating. So with the kids out there sailing and they tipped it over, wasn't going to sink. You got your lifesavers on, and so you hopefully could get it righted. And we had a hand bilge pump, so quite often after storms, the boat down there at the T-dock, we'd climb down into it, and this little homemade bilge pump that had a handle and pump, and it was only about that big around, I guess, and had a plunger, and you'd get down in there and start pumping the water out of it, and after a while you would get it halfway empty, and somebody else would come along and they would pump for an hour, and before long we'd have it empty.
Well, I was going to say, and you learned a lot about maintenance too.
We certainly did.
I'm sure you polished and waxed and cleaned and took care of the boat.
Especially on Memorial Day, very dedicated. We participated at Farron Park, the American Legion, and we'd come down and have services on Memorial Day, and part of our job was to row back and forth just off of Farron Park, and at the start of the ceremonies we had a bell. Of course, you had up to 8 bells, and we would start dinging that every 10 seconds. Ding, ding, during the whole ceremony. And towards the end of the ceremony, we would start at one end, and that morning we had gotten out and found all kinds of flowers, dandelions or whatever we could find that was colorful, and bring it down. And so we had baskets full of flowers and a wreath. And so at the end of the ceremony on shore, we would row down the length of Farron Park and throw out flowers that we had gathered that morning. And sometimes it was a little chilly, and maybe we didn't have very many, but we put them out, and then at the end of the Farron Park, we would put the reef out with a small anchor, and it would be out there all day long for the rest of that day. So we participated, and we rowed, and we did oars up as salutes, and we were pretty good sailors, I think.
I can picture that in my mind. So we're teaching young boys patriotism and love of country and so forth. How fantastic! And then to be a part of that ceremony and everything. Well, you have a compass. Tell me about the compass.
Well, it's a magnetic compass. This particular one is the only one that I was aware that we had. And that was in starting at least in the early 1950s. So I don't know how old it was, but it's the only one that I used and everybody else used to navigate on Lake Eustis or Lake Ayers. And especially when you went to find Haynes Creek, that we had some maps that we had drawn, or Skipper Pearson probably had. And he'd give us magnetic directions. So you get this set up in the middle of the boat, and of course it was it could go up and down, but this has always stayed there. I don't know how old it is. My guess is it's at least in the 1940s.
Oh yeah,
and it could have been manufactured back in the 1930s even. So, but this was the one that we had the whole time I was in. So, and had used it to navigate Lake Eustis and some of the others.
Pre-GPS.
That's exactly right.
No smartphones to tell you where to go. You just navigated by the compass and
that's right.
And
back
landmarks.
During that time, I got a book on using a sextant to shoot the stars and navigate by that, and that which is interesting. So we tried to go the whole way. I never got to really use it, but I did have the book, and we started into learning about it. So, navigating by the stars.
Yeah, fascinating. Whatever happened to you? I mean, did you lose track of them, or they just fade away? Lots of times when you have a skipper like Skipper Pearson and he leaves, it's difficult to find someone of that dedication to continue.
Well, Mr. Arndt left, and I think there was a Mr. Price. I think, as I recall, he was a pharmacist that was our skipper for several times. But then I left. I had went into the Army, National Guard, had other things to do, so I really don't know. I was always had wonder what happened to old Black Baller 2.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful boat, and I had a lot of good experiences on it. And
it's hard to find people, David, that remember that were involved. Wouldn't it be great if we could stumble on someone that said, "Oh yeah, I remember that boat. It was we sold it to somebody, or it was transferred someplace."
Well, when I was first mate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We had 8 when this picture was taken, and we have another picture that looked like there was at least 12 or 15 at one time.
Yeah, there was one of the birthday
a lot of people
parties.
came and go, and
yeah,
like they do in all organizations and scouts, that come in for a time, but a lot of the boys learned an awful lot from Skipper Pearson.
Yeah, he was the kind of mentor that, Boy Scouts has been a fantastic program, and unfortunately sometimes you have a few people that don't represent it very well. But to me, somebody like Skipper Pearson had such a huge impact on Eustis. Being there, being a role model, teaching, working with, inspiring young boys, and just like a lot of Boy Scouts, I always thought that if someone became an Eagle Scout, that they had a great scoutmaster. Most likely they had some pretty strong parents that encouraged and helped them, and that they learned right away, to take a task on and move forward with it. Right. And so, it's got to be rewarding for a 12-year-old boy to have control of a 25-foot boat, and
especially with a little 2 horsepower Johnson kicker,
and be able to navigate and to understand and become familiar with.
Well, one of the races they used to have, boat races there on Lake Eustis on February 22nd celebration, and one of the sections for boat racing was the Higgins boat, which was around 1950, made out of plywood, 6-cylinder engine, and there was a lot of those purchased and used on the lake, and they would have a class with that speedboat. And so we were out on the lake just watching, had the little 2-horsepower Johnson kicker on the transit we finally got moving around, and one of the men that owned a boat lived just down the street from me, a Bob Hurst, started in towards shore, but the boat was not going very fast, and it seemed to be going down in the water, and he was pushing, trying to get back into shore. He had hit something in the water and had ripped a hole in the bottom of that Higgins boat, and somebody in a small boat went to try to help him, and so we started with the little kicker, headed that way too, and we got up near there, and the speedboat was getting lower and lower, and it was so low that the other boat that was trying to keep it up threw the rope away and said it was about to take them down too. Here comes the Black Baller 2, 25-foot lifeboat. They threw us two ropes, and we tied them around the clit, and we motored into Cottremarine, taking that speedboat in with our boat, moved it back up where they could get some good wires on it and a hoist. And so it did not go to the bottom of Lake Eustis. The Boy Sea Scouts were there to rescue. So we did our things on Lake Eustis.
Yeah, I guess originally the yacht sailing club was a powerboat deal. They did a lot of that powerboat racing on. I remember going a couple of times. My son had a dragster powerboat, and
right.
Phil Conant was a big drag racer with boats. And
they had a lot of hydroplanes, little thin plywood, only about so thick, big Mercury engines on them, all speeded up, and they had a lot of those that raced during that time. And one of our Sea Scouts had built one of those boats. In fact, 2 or 3 of our Sea Scouts eventually had those and raced them there on Lake Eustis. So that were Sea Scouts not only with that sailing boat, but with some power boats also.
Stepped up a little bit more speed, but
quite
still,
a bit more.
Yeah, but still, the Black Baller 2 had to have a special place in everybody's heart, though. It was a part of your life. Going to meetings, sailing a boat, being with friends, and
absolutely the 24-hour cruise, the big one that we had. We ended up overnight down at the west end of Lake Eustis with the wind out of the east. And so you don't go straight into the wind, you have to tack sideways with it. Took us 5 total tacks from one side of Lake Eustis to the other, 5 times, to finally work our way and back to get all the way into Eustis.
Yeah, those are the kind of things where you travel 85 miles to go 20 miles, or 10 miles.
Maybe even 5.
Yeah.
And,
but you learned and can appreciate things like that. It was...
Some of the racing sailing boats would get almost straight up in the wind, it seemed like, but ours, you couldn't get near that close. Kind of on the quarter, but if you had patience, you could take that boat most anywhere you wanted to.
Now, did you ever upgrade the sails from the parachute sails to canvas sails?
No, not during my lifetime, but it was used for years.
But those must have been World War II parachutes.
That's right. And Skipper got them, cut them up, sewed them together himself to make them. And so I wasn't there when they did all that, but I was there with the result of his his work, his
Well,
contributions.
That has got to be so fascinating. Got to be a great memory for you, and for you to preserve some of this stuff is remarkable. The compass that's truly a magnificent antique heirloom that
Still works.
it does. Isn't that amazing? I bet if we put you out there,
No batteries to.
yeah, we probably put you back on Lake Eustis and turn you loose. You could sail the night away.
I'd love it. I love sailing.
Now, you told me that there was maybe one or two other guys that were in there that are still around. Are you about the last of the members of the ship, or do you know about many of them?
Charlie Hurst was in there. He lived right down there on the lake, and as I recall, he's still around. Saw him a few days ago at the Old Timers meeting, and so we were able to talk a little bit about the old days out on Lake Eustis. And
Well, at least you got one person to corroborate your story, David.
one more, exactly. Yeah. He motored a lot, but he loved the sailing much as I did.
Well, we're going to get in touch with the sailing club, and I know that they'd have hundreds of questions and everything, and about it. And has Lake Eustis, by the way, changed? I mean, obviously there's development all around there, houses and everything else, but over time things have got to change a little bit. Talk about going Haynes Creek. The Army Corps of Engineers took over and they did Moss Bluff. They did the dam there to control water flow and everything else. And so
the level course wasn't controlled way back then. It depended on hurricanes or storms or rain to regulate things, and of course that helped to keep the same level. And but with the old lifeboat, you could use it for a diving platform. You get out in the middle of the lake and get hot and pull down the sails and go swimming.
Oh, well, this is just, I really enjoy these. And, David, you have a story about a lifeboat that young men enjoyed for years and years. I have my boat story is really different. I lived in Orlando and on a lake, and there were 5 or 6 boys in the neighborhood, and we found a wooden boat that had been swamped and abandoned. Anyway,
that happens, right?
We salvaged that boat and hauled it in my garage, and all the boys brought paint from the house and painted it different colors, and we launched it in the lake, and we swam and dived off of it and everything else, for a summer. And I'm sure that kids now have fun and exciting things to do. They'll be telling their grandchildren, "Oh yeah, and I played Mario, and then I did this, and I did this video thing." But
it's nothing like wanting to go sailing, and there's not any wind, but you have a motor, a little small one, it's not very big, to get it on the front of your bicycle and bicycle a mile back down to the T-dock and carry it down and put it on the black ball or 2 and a gallon of gasoline. It was interesting, that little motor and that big boat. Gas tanks were not very big. They were just little old tiny things. One tank full, which was maybe a pint, maybe a couple pints of gasoline, would take that big boat all the way across Lake Eustis. So hopefully you'd find somebody to carry the gas can, 2-gallon gas can, so you could motor across and back again, and then carry it back home again. No place to leave it down there, and put that little motor on the front of on the front of your bicycle and pedal back home, and that's how we now and then motor instead of sailing.
Now, Skipper Pearson had to have had someone helping him. I mean, he couldn't. Were first mates allowed to take the boat out with the Sea Scouts?
You generally need at least 2-3 people every time the boat went out. And so that was, and you had to have life preservers. And you took the oars. If your motor quit, you still had the white ash breeze to bring you home.
Oh, well, David, I have so enjoyed this and all the other stories that we talk about, and now I understand where you got this interest in and knowledge of the weather. Being someone who is sailing, you better know what's going on. You better be able to look at the clouds and see whether this is it's going to develop into something that we need to look in for port, head home, or whether it's just going to blow over and all those kind of things, you know.
Yeah, you learn a lot of things like Skipper Pearson say, red sunrise in the morning, sailor's warning, red at night, sailor's delight. And also you learn some other things, like on airplanes, but on boats you had red and green lights and a white light. Well, which side is which? We had portable ones that we had to put on one side or the other. And Skipper says, well, that's simple. Well, how do I remember? Well, green and starboard and right are all long words, and red and left and port are all short words, and those each go together. And the white light goes in the center in the stern.
All those little memory things that you put together, you know.
Still valid today after all these years.
Yeah, I was, Bob Klingbill, a good friend of mine for many years, was a sailor, and he loved to sail. And we went to Apalachicola one time, and as you were telling me about tacking, we got stranded on the island that went to St. Vincent's Island, and we were trying to sail back into Apalachicola before the real bad storm hit. And I can remember on that boat, and we would get all the way up. I could see the cars on the road there at Apalachicola.
Right.
And the dock is over here about 500 yards. And I'm thinking, gosh, look how close we are. Bob, come about, turn that thing, and we go all the way back out on that. And the cars get smaller and smaller.
That's right.
Then you got to turn around and come back in before you can finally move down there, sail as close as you can into the wind.
You learn some patience.
Absolutely. You can't hurry things. But, you know, it kind of reminds me of sailing. You know, you can't control the wind, David, but you can learn how to set your sails. And so
that's exactly right. You can make them more efficient.
You learn how to navigate.
But it was great. A lot of boys went through the program there, and I'm sure that, like me, in fact, many years later, 30 years later, had to have some trimming done on some trees, and we had a tree trimmer come over and climb up to cut some things out, and he'd thrown a rope down to let limbs down as he cut them or whatever. And so as he was doing some of that, the rope was kind of falling here and there, so I went over and I picked it up and I coiled it and put it down, and as he needed some, I'd bring it out, and a little later he called down and says, "You've handled rope before, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I have."
Yes, sir, and I learned in Boy Scouts how to tie a bowline, and I use that all the time. And
Skipper Pearson taught us to make a bowline with one hand.
That
flip it and then move it around and pull it through the knot and then pull up.
Most important knot in the world is a bowline.
Absolutely.
And you can, once you learn to flip it over and around and back through. Never forget a lesson that will be with you forever.
One of the best lessons I learned was splicing, how to splice a rope properly. And you can do it right. You can took at least under three strands to make sure it would hold. And then, but you would have more of it, and you'd cut part of it off and splice over another round and cut a little bit more off, and so you had a nice smooth from the regular splice out until there wasn't out to the rope, and there wasn't any splice left.
Everything
you can do that with wire or rope, even.
Fascinating, fascinating.
A skill that I still enjoy, that I've used through my whole life from time to time.
Well, stories and friends and adventures, just remarkable. I wish I'd met Skipper Pearson. Seems like to me that he probably was the perfect kind of a guy. I was in Scouts for the first part of my scouting career at a troop in Pine Castle, South Orlando, and most of the adult leaders and the boys in there were involved with the Air Force because of what was Pine Castle Air Force Base then, is now McCoy. And having military people in your scout troop, first of all, they had access to all kind of great things. We all camped in jungle hammocks, and they had all kind of stuff they could get from the Air Force and so forth. But it was great, and not all fathers were like a Captain Pearson. My dad, he went on one camping trip, which surprised the heck out of me that he ever went. But I'd go on my 5-mile hike, and he'd drop me off out at Moss Park, and he'd drive down the road, and I would walk. And I think, man, this wasn't too bad. He said, "Okay, Johnny, you got a half-mile in." That 5-mile hike became a really long deal, and then you had to fix your meal at the end of it.
Oh, absolutely.
So I managed to get a fire going and cook a hot dog. So anyway.
Nothing like camping out on a chilly night and anchored out in the middle of Lake Griffin, and there's 3 or 4 of you on board, and about in the middle of the night you hear a teeth chattering, and I look over, and Fred is shaking, and he's cold, and it's dark, and "What's the matter, Fred?" "I'm cold." Well, that's obvious. We got to heat you up. So out comes a can of sterno and some tomato soup, and get it heated up and get it into Fred, and he got warmed up, and he said, "Fred, you got to roll up in your blanket. You just can't put it over you and stay warm." So always a learning cycle somewhere.
All right, David. We could go on forever, but we're gonna wrap it up.
I got some pictures that we can probably put on of Skipper Pearson. He was probably one of the best leaders that we've ever had.
Oh, it sounds like a remarkable guy.
Absolutely.
And he's totally unknown in Eustis, but he will be now. We're gonna tell his story and the story of Sea Scouts, and we'll get these pictures and we'll put it on there and everything else.
During the later years, before he passed away, there were several of our scouts that looked after him, that helped a lot of different ways, and so he was well taken care of.
Oh, a guy that devoted his life to young men and helping them mature. Fantastic.
Yep, we learned some good lessons from Skipper.
You amaze me, David. You amaze me. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. We'll do it again sometime.
Oh, all the time.